These are, this is the Lecture 6, Democratic Peace Theory for Political Science 4327, Introduction to International Relations. As the empirical literature became dense with a seemingly uncountable number of variables explaining why states engage in interstate armed conflict, some noticed that empirically democracies do not fight each other. There are almost no cases of democracy fighting other democracies. However, this does not mean that democracies do not fight wars, but that they always fight authoritarian regimes. For now, let democracies be defined as a regime type where government officials are elected rather than installed, with free, fair, and open election, and with marginal civil liberties and rights. As a result, many began heralding democracies not fighting each other during the mid-1990s. The empirical strength of the relationship changed how Washington, D.C., especially Presidents Clinton and George W. Bush, put stock in that if contemptible nations became democracies, the onset of armed conflict would be attenuated, if not eliminated. However, those interested in this phenomenon cannot explain why democracies don't fight each other. The empirical literature, as dense as it is, provides little to no compelling reasons why this may be true. Most just know that democracies do not fight each other. Luckily, many have written about the democratic peace theory and its causes. So why don't democracies fight? The first is the norms argument. The norms argument is most associated with liberalism, but also to a certain effect constructivism. Democratic state, the saying goes, or the argument goes, democratic states do not fight each other because the methods of resolving domestic disputes among political parties and other political actors bleed into foreign policy realms. The institutions argument puts forth that democracies do not fight each other because of domestic political institutions that constrain foreign policy making. Ostensibly, this argument is based on George Sabel's classic take on positivist political science. The book was called Veto Players. Veto players are at the heart of the two concepts in this course, the selectorate and minimum winning coalition. BDM talks at length about how a large selectorate is and how this influences foreign policy making. But Sabel's point is not just the number, but the number that can legitimately stymie government policy. Low-intensity conflict. Most conflictual behavior in the international system is not hostile or militarized, but has low intensity. The most common low-intensity action is the placing and implementing economic sanctions on another country. Sanctions are defined as an economic and political measure by a sender state to pressure another state into changing policies or practices. Currently, the United States enforces sanctions on 18 different nations for a myriad of reasons. These are mostly enforced by the United States Treasury on Americans. For example, if an American businessman conducts transactions with a sanctioned nation, each instance is punishable by a maximum $1 million fine and 20 years in a federal prison. Do sanctions work, though? Sometimes sanctions are successful and sometimes they are almost worthless. On the positive side, sanctions placed on South Africa's apartheid government were quite successful. Also, a ban on the importation of conflict diamonds from West Africa. On the negative side, there are tons of nations where sanctions did not work very well. One of the most obvious is the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which is North Korea, Cuba, among a host of others. In theory, sanctions work when a state can impose sanctions that are more costly than the change in policy for the receiver nation, plus a capitulation cost. The sanctioning game. There are several rules to the sanctioning game. There are two players, a sanctioning nation, denoted as N1 here, and a sanctioned nation, N2. There is some policy, P1, which is implemented by N2, and N1 opposes it. To force a change in the policy, N1 may impose a sanction. Sanction 1 that has a distribution such that it cancels all economic activity between the two nations at its maximum and has a lower bound of the smallest divisible amount greater than 0. In a sense, it is a signaling game, but with credible commitments being the driving force of sanctions. Nation 1 must impose a sanction cost greater than the payoff for P1 for N2. However, the expected utility for N2 of P1 is ex ante unknown for N1. So there are two possible strategies for N1 to successfully alter N1 on P1, N2 on P2. First, it can play the sanction as quite low and hope that N2 is relatively weak. In this case, the expected utility of P1 is low. Or they can go for broke. The problem with this approach is that it places considerable hardship on the nation of N1. In short, the most consistent solution is to impose sanctions that are costly to the sending nation. The Russian game. Recently, a foreign crisis erupted between the United States and Ukraine. United States, Ukraine, and the European Union to some extent, and Russia. At the heart of this disagreement is the Ukrainian toppling of a president that was extremely close to the Russian Federation and its president, Vladimir Putin. As a result, the Russian military entered a portion of Ukraine known as Crimea with a large ethnic and linguistic Russian population. It's something in Crimea, 97% of ethnically Russian, and 92.3% of those in Crimea speak Russian as their first and only native language. The United States declared that it prefers the Russian military to leave Crimea. As the United States does not want to use military force, it places sanctions on Russia to pressure for a withdrawal of troops. This game will not be solved under this condition because the United States is not prepared to impose sanctions that would force Russia to capitulate. However, there are some practical ways the United States could impose enough cost to force capitulation. The United States, with the backing of the EU, could impose passport restrictions that would prohibit any Russian national from entering an EU nation or the United States. This may not seem like a strong sanction, but remember that the regime is propped up by natural gas barons. If they were prohibited from traveling, and it would cause hardship for those most influential in the government. Second, the United States with the EU could prohibit the importation of natural gas from the Russian Federation. Third, the United States could blockade the Baltic port, that is Russia's only warm water port. It would ostensibly end the reason for Russia going into the Crimea area. Fourth, it could freeze all Russian assets in American and European banks. Russia's financial system is completely bereft of confidence. Most wealthy people in the Russian Federation put their money in banks in London, Paris, and Brussels. Implications for sanctions. Sanctions do work, but only in a limited manner. In order for sanctions to work, the two nations must share a lot of economic ties. If you do not have these dense ties, it is extremely difficult to raise costs of an action to the point of capitulation. It actually brings up a strange paradox, wherein sanctions work when you sanction a close friend rather than an adversary.